So I'm making this video for people who are not going to get to go to nationals this year, and I am assuming that if you have been drawn to spend the time watching this, then one of two things has happened. Either you still have time left in your forensics career, but this was the year that you thought you were going to get to go to nationals, and it's really kind of a disappointment that you don't get to go. Or it could be that this is the end of your forensics career. It could be that you're aging out, that you're out of eligibility. It could be that your family's financial situation has changed, or for other reasons, forensics is just not realistic anymore. In either case, those are completely different circumstances, and I think you respond to them differently. But in either case, I think there's one fundamental lesson. You're at a really, really good teachable moment for one error that I think a lot of us make, and I want to talk some about that. I want to talk a little about my own experiences, and then I have a couple of recommendations for things that I think you can do right now. What I think a lot of us do is, I think when we begin something, when we begin a career, when we begin a marriage, when we begin parenting, or when we begin forensics, what we do is we lay out in our imagination two things. We lay out how much work is going to be required, and then we lay out what the ending is going to look like. And then we struggle an awful lot if what actually happens doesn't follow what we had planned in our heads. And so, if you're in that first situation where you have time left in your forensics career, but by now you thought you'd be doing better, maybe you have friends who don't seem as though they're as talented as you are, and they don't seem as though, or possibly they don't seem as though they work as hard as you do, but it seems like they get all the breaks. And it's happened enough, and especially it's happened here at the end of the season when the whole community is gathering for the big celebration of excellence, and someone else has a spot there and you don't. And what I would say is that what you've done is you have constructed an entire reality, and you've constructed a measurement rubric, and then your actual competitive results didn't comply and didn't line up with that. And sometimes, I would say most of the time, the lesson that you need to learn is more is demanded of you than you thought. More is demanded of you than you had figured out. This is a talk that I have a lot of times with the college students here, especially when they are intimidated about taking a class because they think it's going to be difficult. Very often it's a math class or a lab science. And I'll ask them, are you going to run away from things for the rest of your life just because they're difficult? And I ask them, do you plan to be married someday? And most of them will say, well, yeah, I want to get married. Do you plan to have kids someday? And almost all of them say, oh, yeah, I think I make a good parent. Well, do you think there aren't going to be days when staying married is harder than you thought it would be? Do you think there aren't going to be days when raising children is harder than you thought it was going to be? And are you going to turn around and run when that happens? And in particular, the decision to stay even when you realize the task is bigger than what you thought, that is a habit. That's a habit of character. That's a habit of decision making. It's something not developed overnight. It's something that can be strengthened, can become one of your baseline beliefs, one of your default positions, if you take the little easy decisions and you practice not being daunted, not being pushed away, by understanding, recognizing, acknowledging that it's going to take more work than you thought. And forensics is one of those little moments where you can make that decision and you can strengthen that capacity in yourself. So if you're not getting to go to nationals this year and you really thought that this was your year, and maybe there's the added frustration that you look around at all the people who are going to nationals and you don't understand what separates you from them, I would just say that everybody's path is individual. I've worked with a whole lot of forensics competitors over the years, and I have seen some who were prodigies and had just all kinds of beginner's luck, and I have seen others who were late bloomers who kept plugging away at it, and late in their career, when the breakthrough came, it came like a tidal wave, and all that work and all that patience and all that waiting for results was absolutely worth it. And I have also seen people who set up expectations for how quickly the success was going to come, and I've seen them walk away and quit because it didn't come on the timeline that they had expected. Now, you might be in the second situation. It might be the end of the road for you. This might be the end of forensics because you're about to head off to college, or it could be that your family's made the decision that this is the last season in forensics. For you, what I would say is, I would first of all tell you about my own experience, because I started out in forensics when I was 12 years old and in 7th grade, and I continued to do it until I was 22 and a fifth-year senior in college. And I'm going to tell you the truth. I never went to nationals in anything. when I was in junior high and high school, I was in an area of the country, one of the suburbs of Dallas, Texas, at the end of the 1980s, from the mid to the end of the 1980s. There were a number of programs there that were just unbelievably good. We had multiple NFL Nationals winners, multiple TOC winners in CX debate, in Lincoln Douglas, and a number of other individual events. And so I would go out to the local tournaments, and I didn't necessarily appreciate at the time that my skills were being honed. I was learning a ton, but I was getting slapped around by these extraordinarily good debaters. And it was very, very frustrating at the time. But then when I went off to college, started at Baylor, which at the time had one of the top national debate tournament NDT programs in the country, I realized that that foundation that had been laid for me, that was going to help an awful lot. And they welcomed me in when they saw that I had a work ethic, and they taught me a lot of the things that I had never quite grasped. But now I had kind of a new challenge, because back at the end of the 1980s, up until really my first year out of the activity, 1992, up until then, it was written into the rules of the National Debate Tournament that any college could only qualify 2 teams. And Baylor at the time had a fairly deep bench, and I never worked my way up onto the top 2 teams. I was a good researcher, I was a good strategist, but I was not that good of an in-round debater. I didn't have that much killer instinct. I didn't go for the jugular that well. And by the end of my career, I got to the point where on a good day, I could take down anybody in the country, and I got lots of good wins. I got to the elims of some very, very tough tournaments, and I was satisfied after a while with my debate career. But it did take a while. And when about 2 or 3 tournaments into that 5th senior year, when my partner quit and my circumstances changed and it became very clear that this was the end of the road for me, I will freely admit that it was devastating. It was really, really crushing. But I gave it a little time, and what I found out was that I had had that experience, and I had put in all that work. I had invested all of that discipline, and the dividends, the payback, was going to be unbelievably rich. I can compare it to when I was younger. I actually had 8 years of piano lessons, and at about the end of those 8 years, I was not a particularly good piano player, and it just sort of tailed off into nothing. And I was tempted a few times to think, well, that was time wasted, but it wasn't. For the rest of my life, on multiple occasions, many occasions, it's come in so handy that I know how to read music. It's come in very handy that I can illustrate things as an educator now using musical terms. I'm at a school where the music major is one of the healthier, larger majors, and I have a lot of students who aren't music majors who nevertheless have played musical instruments, love to play musical instruments. And very frequently, I have told a student in my public speaking class, who I know plays an instrument, and particularly if they play piano, I'll say, for example, your delivery is way too staccato and it needs to be more legato, and they get it right away. And so the fact that I have that feel, that I have that sense memory, that experience taught me things, that all goes into the toolbox. And so if you did forensics, and remember, back at the beginning of this video, I talked about how not only do we in our imaginations try to decide how much work is going to be required, but we try to decide what the ending is going to look like. And in all my daydreams over the years, when I started out in forensics, I was going to be the champion of something. I was going to be the national champion, or I was going to be the state champion, or at least I was going to go out winning a tournament. And I think I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again just very briefly. The very first tournament I ever did team policy debate, when I was in 8th grade. We went undefeated and we won the tournament, and that was off to a great start, and I never won another tournament. I was in the finals a few times, always lost in the finals, always got 2nd place, and I got down to the last tournament of my career. I'm a 5th-year senior. They've asked me to come out of retirement for just 1 weekend because they've got a young debater who hasn't been able to go to any tournaments all year. So I go to this tournament with him. We go undefeated. I'm the top speaker. We get all the way to the final round. We are debating this team that we have beaten comfortably over and over and over again, and they go for topicality. We're running a case that's the middle of the topic. I give a 2AR that I think is pretty much the best 2AR I can do, and we lose on a 2-1. And the ending I had written for myself didn't have me at a little podunk tournament with an inexperienced partner, debating a team that I did not think was terribly good, and then losing to them. But really, that ending that humbled me, that ending that took my idea of success and turned it upside down, that has shaped how I look at success, what I think about forensics ever since. So If you are right now struggling, how can I make this all meaningful? What do I do about the fact that everybody else is headed off to nationals and I'm not? And that's it for me. And I wanted my ending, the end of my road, to be at the big community celebration that everybody else gets to gather and celebrate excellence, and I'm left at home. What do I do about that? Well, the first thing I would say is I think that what you've done, you have it in store, and you are going to put it to use. And today it might be hard to see that. It was hard for weeks or even months for me to appreciate what my forensics career had done for me back at the time when it had just ended. But eventually I saw for myself that everything, all that skill, all that capacity that had been built into me, that was going to become the leverage. Those were the go-to skills that I was going to use every day. And today I treasure it, even though it's not the kind of forensics career that would make a good movie or a good storybook. The second thing that I have seen a lot of people do when their season comes to kind of a premature end, or their career comes to kind of a premature end, the ones who I thought were more emotionally healthy, the ones who were the wise ones, what they do is they don't let the end be the end. If their friends are all going off to nationals, then what they do is they provide support to their friends at nationals even while they're at home. That could be as little as praying for them each day. That could be as much as keeping in touch with them and seeing if they need any spot research. Maybe there's an affirmative that's tearing up the tournament that your friends don't have anything on, and your friends are running from event to event, but back home, you could do a little bit of work and you could send it to them. Maybe it's just following their results and sending them tweets or other kinds of notes of encouragement. But whatever it is, you remember that you are part of a community. And what was going to be beautiful about that celebration was the coming together of the community. Even though you're separated by distance, even though you don't get the excitement that's in the air from being on site, you can make the choice. In the face of obstacles and difficulty, you can make the choice that you still belong, that you still care about all of those folks, and that you are going to put forth extra effort to contribute to it and be part of that celebration. So if you're not headed off to nationals, and if that feels to you like a major setback, or even like something crushing, like the end of the road that you never saw coming, that is the kind of experience that, even though it hurts at the time, very often that experience gets redeemed, and it winds up being something important, something that you look back on that helps you make meaning out of other experiences as well. So take those thoughts and see if they help at all.